I'm going to say something that's going to make you mad. And I do this knowing what the result is going to be. Andre 3000 said it best. Y'all don't want to hear me. You just want to dance. You click the thumbnail, you know what I'm going to talk about here. I'm going to talk about Brad Branch hurting the team on Sunday and possibly next Sunday as well. Am I doing this because I hate Brian Branch? No, I was super happy when the team took him. He's better than anyone could reasonably expect in terms of how that pick has turned out. With Aiden Hutchinson out, there's a pretty high possibility that Brian Branch is the Lions' best defensive player. And I see that with Kirby Joseph, with all due respect, leading the NFL in interceptions right now. But in Sunday's game, in which Branch was penalized and then the league called it an ejection, that was negligence on the part of Brian Branch, not the NFL. Like in 1995, when I was gearing up for high school football games, pulled the old VHS tape out by the NFL Rocks. It was loaded with hits like this. That was the whole point of that video, was like, hey, look how awesome these huge hits are. Like, the league used to applaud exactly what Brian Branch just did. It would have been played with a backing track of Motley Crue's Kickstart My Heart in the late 80s or early 90s, because the NFL was not super up on what the kids were listening to once grunge hit, so they were still using the 80s metal. So, I mean, like, there's going to be a bunch of reactionary people out here screaming hypocrisy. But this was the right call by the NFL rules as they currently exist. Like, they got other plays wrong. I'm not going to sit here with a straight face trying to tell you that Cleet Blakeman officiated a flawless game, as did his entire crew. They got calls wrong. This was not one of those calls. And the reason the league called in on this one is because Brian Branch did two separate things that should result in a 15-yard flag on the same play. Like, this is exactly what the optional rule to eject the player on this is meant for, specifically. Like, when Brian Branch watches the receiver not make the catch, he's still 5 yards away from impacting that player. And he's been locked in on exactly what that receiver was doing for a 30-yard sprint from the middle of the field to the sideline where this hit occurs. This is Brian Branch coming off his coverage responsibility right in the middle of the field when Love makes it clear where the ball's going. Like, to even get to this spot is the spectacular kind of play that has become almost mundane watching Brian Branch play safety week in and week out. Most teams don't have anyone who can do this. We have two guys. It's crazy. Like, I can't stress enough that this is one of my favorite players on the team, and I love watching him play football. But we're talking about what happens next. When the receiver doesn't make the catch, Branch is looking right at him, a full 5 yards away from impact. The receiver's in a compromising position. He's not landing on his feet. He can't prep for a hit. This is the literal definition of a defenseless receiver at this point. This is the exact sort of player that this rule is meant to protect. If Branch gives him a shoulder, even a forearm, to any part of his body on this situation, it's getting flagged for 15 yards. Elton hasn't had an opportunity to become a runner. We don't have to like this. This is the rule as it is written and has been communicated for a very long time at this point. Any hit on a defenseless receiver, when it has no bearing on the result of the play, is going to be called a personal foul. That is the rule. It was an incredibly stupid and selfish play by a guy who is generally anything but those two things. And then there's the helmet-to-helmet aspect of the play on top of what would already have been a foul if it was a lot closer to a textbook tackle the way the league would like it to happen. In any circumstance, dropping your head to make forcible contact with a receiver's head as he catches the ball is a personal foul. Period. End of sentence. Done. You cannot do that. Just hitting him here is already a 15-yard penalty. Then Brian Branch added helmet-to-helmet to the offense of hitting him. And, like, I can already hear your knuckles dragging as you form the argument that it was a bang-bang play, but the rules don't say you have to mean it, or that it doesn't count if you're sorry. And Brian Branch was absolutely not apologetic, by the way. We'll get to that after. So the refs in the moment saw a play that was probably the most clear example of that type of personal foul that you will ever see in a game, and they threw a flag. But then the league got to watch it a couple more times and saw that in addition to just being the hitting a defenseless receiver, it was hitting a defenseless receiver with your helmet in his face. And they made the call. And it was the right call. And if you look at the hits that have resulted in suspensions and take off your fan hat, this is right there with them. Launching has nothing to do with this rule, by the way. Just so we're absolutely clear on that. Like, launching by itself, regardless of anything else you do, makes it this penalty. But launching is not even remotely required for this penalty to be called or enforced. It is the head-to-head is much worse than the launching. That's what the league actually cares about. Launching looks bad on highlight reels. Head-to-head is what actually causes injuries that cost players their careers. Like, if he'd also left his feet, we would be looking at a guaranteed multi-game suspension for this hit. But he didn't, so we might not. Like, this is a player who would come all the way over there from his deep half coverage on the opposite side of the field. That is where he started the run towards where this went. And he decided he was going to get a hit on a receiver regardless of what happened on his way there. And that decision is what cost his team the services for the rest of the game and possibly potentially more time than that. The league has suspended players for only one game for hits like this. They've also made the decision to not do it in some cases. We'll see how that goes. Like, they may decide his fine, like a fine the size of a rookie contract game check and just over half of a game of time missed, is penance enough in the case of Brian Branch right here. As a Lions fan, that's obviously what I'm hoping for. I want him to be on the field next week. But if you're looking for a conspiracy on this one, I would just like to point something out to you that makes what you're saying just patently ridiculous. To that point in the game, the officials had called 7 penalties. I'd like you to take a guess of how many of those penalties went against the Lions. Like, you obviously know it's less than half, or I wouldn't even be talking about this, right? It wasn't 3. It wasn't 2. It wasn't 1. Every single penalty that had been called to midway through the second quarter of this game by Clete Blakeman's crew went against the Packers. And when Brad Branch gets to sit down and watch this play and review, whether it's at a suspension hearing or just in the DB room with the coaches going like, hey, don't do this, he will have to admit that everything I just said is true. Like, I love him anyway, obviously. The reason I love him is because of the intensity and the heart that made him lose his ever-loving mind in the wake of this play. Ideally, like, you'd like to see him keep his composure a little more than this. Like, get mad, yes, but not to the point of costing the team another 15 yards with an unsportsmanlike conduct on the way off the field. Like, if we're going to get an extreme reaction one way or the other, like calmly and dejectedly walking to the locker room with your head hung low to shower and change and try to get out of there before the press show up, versus losing your damn mind at having been wronged by the officials like that, because that is his perception of what happened right there, or was in the moment. Friends, I'll take the guy who cares too much every single time. I'll take the guy that's willing to fight every cheesehead idiot in that stadium, in the parking lot, right that second if they'll just come out and beat him. I'll take the fire. I will take the intensity. Because Brian Branch legitimately did not think he had done anything that bad in the moment. Just like live, I didn't think it looked that bad. Like, I went back at halftime, and that's when I kind of started questioning whether it might actually be the dirtiest hit I've ever seen a Detroit Lion put on somebody. And it's close. Like, this isn't the same thing as other fan bases' false anger towards Kirby Joseph tackling tight ends the way that every single safety in the NFL tackles tight ends, but getting a couple of bad results for the tight end in question. That's actually the opposite of this. That's people confusing result with process the other way. In the end here, Melton was fine after the play. He ran to the huddle. There were other hits that had much worse results, even just yesterday. And that's a reason we might get lucky here. And not lose Brian Branch for more time than we already did. Like, in the end, the receiver was fine, and the league tends to react most harshly to the player who makes the league look bad. Like, if Brian Branch actually gets suspended on this, it is going to be a reaction to him throwing up double birds to the fans in the stadium, even though that's not what they're going to say it was for. That's my 2 cents. Have a great day.